I'd been meaning to watch Boyhood for such a long time, and I finally got around to buying the DVD, and I had a few questions. Is it a gimmick? Is it enjoyable? Is it an achievement? And the answer to those questions are yes, not really, and yes. This was released in 2014, it's directed and written by Richard Linklater, and we have a cast including Ellar Coltrane, Patricia Arquette, and Ethan Hawke. And Coltrane plays a character called Mason. And this is the bit that makes it an achievement, but also a gimmick, because actually, as a story, it doesn't have a lot to offer. But as a film, as a piece of art, quite interesting, because Coltrane plays Mason for 11 years. In fact, I think it might be 12 years. It was filmed from 2002 until 2013. They filmed a little bit every single year. This film was more than a decade in the making. And as a piece of art, it is quite interesting to watch these characters age over that course of time. And I think that that's really fascinating. And I think Coltrane did a really great performance with this character. And that part of it works really well. And as a one-time watch, I found it to be quite enjoyable. There's one bit in particular that kind of, it just made me feel a little goosebumpy and excited, because early on in the film, this girl is singing a Britney Spears song, and it was a beautiful moment, because even though this was released in 2014, that was actually filmed at the beginning of the 2000s at the time, and we're obviously looking at decor from the 2000s and fashion from the 2000s and a song, of course. And I'm aware that there are films filmed at that time and released at that time with actual decor and clothing from the time. But because this was released much later, what we're watching is authentic. And obviously most films released in 2014 wouldn't have an authentic representation of the early 2000s. They could get close to it, but not exact. And again, I know there are films filmed in the 2000s, but there was just something quite magical about that. And to actually watch things change over time and knowing that this was actually filmed in this year and this was filmed several years later, it's just, as an experience, as a piece of art, it is quite fascinating to watch. But at the same time, the narrative is really boring. It's basically about Mason growing up as a boy, a teenager, and it's very dull. The character is perfectly likeable. I don't have any issues there. But at the same time, it's boring. The character is interesting enough, but the narrative doesn't have a lot to offer. Maybe if I was a young boy growing up in the early 2000s and I could kind of relate to Mason on that level, maybe it would be a little bit more interesting. And if that is you, I'd love to know what you think of it. But as a story, it's not very interesting. As a piece of art, it's an achievement, and I'm glad it exists. And I can't get over how I felt listening to that Britney Spears song, knowing that that was filmed back in the day. And again, there are many films filmed in the 2000s, released in the 2000s, but because it's all packaged together, we are quite literally traveling through time in this film. And it's an amazing experience, but it's very boring at the same time. So if you want to watch an interesting narrative, there are many other films that I'd recommend before this. But if you're curious about how it's going to feel to be traveling through time with footage from all of these years, it's quite interesting. And obviously there's no fake age progression or anything. Everything's completely natural, and that's really quite interesting to see as well. So the story, not very good, not very interesting. Let's say, hypothetically, this was not filmed over the course of over a decade and we did have different actors playing the different ages. It would be tremendously boring. But as a novelty, it works well. And I can't imagine I'd watch it again. It's also horrendously long. It's over 2 hours. But to be fair, if you're going to take 11 years to film something, you're probably going to have a lot of footage. So I imagine there was a lot they didn't put in, and I guess they didn't want to get rid of anything else. I'm purely speculating on that, of course. But it is way longer than it needed to be. And I don't think it's a good story. If we didn't have the novelty of being filmed across over a decade, it wouldn't be a great experience. The performances are fine, the technical aspects are fine. But while it is basically a gimmick, it's a gimmick I'm happy to recommend. And it is, in that regard, quite an achievement. So if you're curious, if you're a film fan, if you want to travel back in time, check out Boyhood. If you're looking for a good story, it's not going to be this. But if you're curious then I'd say it's one that's certainly worth watching.